right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Shop and Chivalry podcast. My guest today, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Brandon Riches, right?
Riches,
that's
right.
Okay, perfect. So Brandon, tell us about yourself.
Well, I grew up in New Orleans on the West Bank in Algiers and lived there till I was about 12. And then my dad decided to take us to the country, and we moved to Tennessee. And we bought a farm and started having cows and horses and whatnot. And so I went to high school up in Tennessee, but made my way back to Mississippi for law school at Ole Miss.
Okay.
So
excellent. What prompted that move to go to Tennessee?
My dad wanted us to have the farm experience, right?
Okay.
He wanted to have us out there building fences and raising animals and stuff, and that's what we did.
Interesting. Yeah, I lived on a farm for a month out in Texas. Same month my dad grew up on. It was one of those, I guess, maybe in his eyes, rite of passages, or maybe it's something he felt like kids should be able to do. And so, I was on a vegetable farm out there in Hereford, Texas. But yeah,
never heard of it.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, okay. It was good. We had about 20 something acres and raised Black Angus. Not as a business, more of just a hobby.
Yeah.
But grew up, handling those and all of the things that kind of come with it, the fences and the maintenance and stuff.
Interesting. And then, so how old were you when? Yeah,
so I did like elementary in New Orleans and high school in Tennessee, or, I think it was middle school and high school in Tennessee.
Gotcha. And so you did your undergraduate at Ole Miss, or? No,
actually, I grew up being LDS or Mormon, and so I went to BYU because it was basically free, and so I went out there for college. Prior to that, though, I had served a mission in South Africa, so I spent 2 years after high school as a missionary in South Africa.
Interesting. I'm watching a documentary right now that's on Netflix. It's a new one. It's about the bombings that took place. Yeah,
I just watched that myself.
Oh, did you? Okay, yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah, I'm on episode 3. So yeah, no spoilers. But yeah, really, really interesting stuff. So you went to BYU, and they've got the blue field, right? Oh no, that's Boise State.
Yeah,
Boise
which we
State.
Played a lot.
Yeah.
So we did see the blue field. No, we're the Cougars, and we have the Y on the mountainside.
That's right.
And the Utah BYU rivalry is pretty well known. A lot of people are familiar with BYU in Mississippi because we came and played Ole Miss, I think, in 2010. And people still talk about the jokes of offering beer and things to the fans.
Oh yeah, and they're full beers, right? They're 4.2, not the 2.5 or something like that.
Right. Yeah, not the Utah limit.
That's interesting. Yes. So you went to Ole Miss, and what did you get your undergrad in?
So I went to BYU for undergrad and did philosophy and political science.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so
okay.
I kind of went knowing I was going to go to law school. Otherwise, I would have done something a little bit more useful as far as getting a job. I think philosophy is really useful, and I really enjoyed
do too.
it.
Yeah, I really do. And in fact, I think, the inability to, I think, have discussions, I think is a product of not engaging in philosophy in elementary education. There's a time in the 20th century where discourse was a required, course. And my goodness, would that be helpful today?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I learned some of the things I learned in there were very helpful. I never liked math, but you put me in there and talk about the philosophy of math and kind of the principles that created math.
Yeah.
And I loved that. It was a completely different way of looking at it.
Yeah. I remember the first time I read the Allegory of the Cave, and just how mind-opening that was, and how it applies to so many different things in life, whether you're moving out of your house, right? And the world that that you understand has really just been given to you. That perspective has been bestowed to you by your family, and then you leave, and then you engage the world, embrace the world. How are you going to respond to that? Are you going to, run back to the intellectual structure that you knew, or can you grow through it? And then what you learn, the people that are back in the cave, will they be able to understand it? Like it's an amazing allegory, parable, really. But
I think it's something that's applicable to all of us as we grow up and become adults. Is there's always going to be some shadows, and in the allegory, it talks about the shadows and not understanding them, and we have things we don't understand, but they eventually come to understand them, and that's what we can do. I mean,
Yeah, for sure. And that's, that's part of the reason I think why podcasts are so popular is that you're hearing people oftentimes kind of have their own view of the world or sense of understanding challenged by somebody else. And again, I'm going to wear this out on this podcast, but it's the idea that your perspective is your world, my perspective is my world, an entire world. And the only way we can share that is by being able to talk with each other.
Yeah.
Talk civilly.
Which we're grateful for.
Yeah, for sure. So in any case, you're running for alderman?
I am.
Okay.
I'm running for Ward 1 alderman.
Ward 1. That's going to be a busy ticket.
It is. We even with the primary taking out one of the contenders between Jennifer and Michael. Mm-hmm. There's still going to be 3 of us on the June general. So
yeah, and 3 great people too. Honestly,
definitely.
At the end of the day, it's good for Ward 1 to have to pick from the level of talent, yourself included. So I'm excited for Ward 1. Now, what are some problems? Well, let me back up because I do like to ask that. You're running as a independent or Democrat?
I'm running as a Democrat.
Democrat, okay.
And it was funny. I went to the last alderman meeting and I talked to John Gill. I wanted to talk to him and introduce myself, and he's like, "You're running as a what?" He just kind of took him aback when I told him that. And being a Democrat, actually a fairly recent convert to being a Democrat. I grew up Republican and worked in Romney's campaign and several other campaigns, and really have a strong background as being a Republican. There were some things that made me decide to switch, and none of those things are actually applicable at the city level, right? I mean, most of my issues are federal issues, though there are a few that you could extrapolate to being applicable at the city. But anyway, it's going to be interesting. I hope to bridge that divide that's in our city right now. It really frustrated me to see the congressional election, the most recent one with Palazzo running unopposed. Unopposed, but no Democrat on the coast thought they needed to put their name out there. And while I'm not necessarily to the point where I want to run for Congress, it just surprises me that we don't have that.
Well, to that point, there's offline conversations I've had with some of the aldermen that noticed the same thing about just Palazzo that were Republicans. They're like, well, I mean, I could have campaigned. I'm more well known than Palazzo. I've had a couple people say that, and whether or not that's true, they certainly believe that.
Sure, I'm sure there are, right? I mean, it just makes sense that there's got to be somebody who could contend.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's excellent. What kind of issues does Ward 1 have?
Well, Ward 1 is primarily residential. We do, they added in the new development there on 90 that includes 4 bowls and keg and barrel.
Yeah, the inlet.
The inlet. And so again, that's more residential, but there are some businesses there. Yeah, and then we have a few, but primarily residential. And so issues all revolve around, the ability for our citizens to live comfortably and to be to represent their individual issues to the city. There's some road issues and some drainage issues and kind of all the normal things that we face here in the city within that ward. Well,
that's just kind of an Ocean Springs thing. You're gonna have drainage issues. I think Ward 4 might have it a little worse than everybody else, but still everybody has drainage issues. And we live near the coast. And we're gonna have drainage issues. We're gonna have erosion issues, and I imagine that's something that residents in Ward 1 are thinking about, is how do we combat the future for, say, hurricanes and erosion?
That's right. Yeah. Another thing, I live in Ward 1 is divided into subdivisions, primarily Fort Byu Estates is the big one, and Monticello Woods and Colioca. And I'm in there's actually 2 Coliokas, and I'm in the small Colioka.
Okay.
Greg Gibson is actually my neighbor there.
Oh, excellent.
And our roads are not as nice as Fort Byu Estates. So that's one issue that I'm sure that Greg and I probably agree on, that we need to, get that fixed. Maybe the others too.
Yeah.
Try to improve our roads, and so they're not as bumpy and falling apart.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a budget there. Are there any concrete roads or are they all asphalt?
I think ours are concrete. And that's the difference. The Fort Byu Estates, and I'm no expert on this, but they appear to be asphalt and a lot smoother.
Right.
Ours appear to be concrete and less smooth.
Well, part of the problem too with that is that the city gets a budget to repair. It's either the city or the county. They get a budget to repair asphalt in the city, and then aldermen can use that in their respective wards. Does not cover concrete, so it becomes a major hurdle to get those things fixed. Yeah. So that might be something that you might consider looking into, because that's an issue. So, and again, some of the nicer neighborhoods have these concrete roads, but it's like you're buying a nicer house in a development that's going to have a harder time getting the road fixed. It's a weird problem to have.
Yeah. And so whoever gets elected in Ward 1, just wait for it. I'm going to be there, to bring this issue up again.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then, okay, great. So, I spent a lot of time in Culioca when I was in high school. I dated a girl out there, and then there's a family friend. You might know him, Johnny Hughes. You know Johnny Hughes? He's an older man, former federal marshal, worked in the Coast Guard. Great dude, but he's a very, very talented wood turner. So he does woodworking on a lathe and whatnot. But yeah, he's a great dude to talk to.
Okay. Well, hopefully I come across him.
Yeah. Shout out to Johnny Hughes. If Brandon stops by, take him in, show him the shop, so
please do.
All right. So what else? I mean, I'm told this will be a weird segue. So there's a lot of Dollar Generals in Ocean Springs. Okay.
One in particular.
Well, your ward's getting one, I'm told.
Are we?
Yeah, on Ocean Springs Road.
Well, that's news to me.
Yeah. I just found out about it. So, but yeah, it seems like, are we getting to the point where maybe we need to manage like the interest that Dollar General has?
Some zoning regulations about our number of Dollar Generals in the city.
Right. Well, I think it was Melanie Allen that was telling me that some cities actually do regulate that, and they say you can't have X amount within a certain mileage of each other.
Yeah. So somebody's got to do that. I mean, if there's situations that have occurred where you have like a McDonald's on 2 corners of the same street, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, but you kind of got to give credit to Dollar General because they're making a business decision to invest. So I'm sure they've done their research. There's got to be a market for it. And it sort of makes sense if, maybe they're in touch with the local politics. There's talk about expanding up there, and then you got the neighborhoods right there. It'd be the most convenient place to get a lot of small things.
The need it really fills is, I don't want to go to Walmart.
Yeah. Oh, right? 100%.
Like you can be in and out of a Dollar General with what you need, and they have almost anything you might need on on a whim, and you can do that in less than 5 minutes. So that's the need they fill. And
the primary competitors with Walmart are not Amazon. It's actually dollar stores. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting. Do you have an opinion on the new Dollar General that went up on West Ocean Springs?
It surprised me, like everybody else who doesn't have the inn. But I'm excited to see what they're going to do with all that space. I mean, as I said before, Dollar General has a lot of stuff, but I didn't think it had that much stuff. So.
Yeah, most of the stores are much smaller.
Right.
And it almost looks like it's going to be like a multi-level building. I don't think it's going to, but I don't
know. It's it reminds me of a Cracker Barrel, like a country store type of thing. I don't know.
Maybe that's what they were going for. I've been told by a couple aldermen that they're going to send me the rendering because I'd love to put it on the website, for everybody to see. So you may have said this, but remind me, what brought you to Ocean Springs?
Yeah. So out of law school, when I graduated from law school at Ole Miss, I got an offer to clerk with the Supreme Court. So I went down to Jackson. We moved to Jackson, and I clerked for Chief Justice William Lawler. He ran for governor this last time. And that was a great experience, but they only last so long. So I was looking for a job after that, and Ocean Springs offered me a job. I got an offer with Rushing and Geis, which is one of the oldest law firms, I think, in the state, but definitely in Ocean Springs. It's right there above the office.
Okay.
And on the corner of Government and Washington.
Yeah.
And so I started my first few months as an associate with them. And we bought a house in Colioca. So that was about 4 years ago.
So what kind of law were you practicing then?
Well, kind of whatever they would throw to me. I started out they do a lot of, civil action, civil related stuff, and really just, lots of different types of litigation. So it was interesting. And eventually I met a friend, or not met a friend. I had a friend who had introduced me to somebody else who did immigration. And that really sparked a big interest for me, and decided to make a change and join him.
What was so interesting to you about the immigration topic?
Well, it's such a hot political topic, right? So there's always kind of it's fun to be involved in something that everyone's talking about.
Sure, I'm sure there's sort of sexiness to that,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But for me, I felt like the biggest thing was going to work with people who I was friends with, one of the guys, and then I made friends with the owner of the firm, and it was just kind of, working with friends was really fun, and I still consider them friends today, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's a little bit more comfortable working in that scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, immigration is an unnecessarily political topic in my opinion, honestly.
Very much so.
And I realize that, especially having a friend in California who got married to a girl who was Canadian. Her dad worked in California, so they got married, and the issues, the money they had to pay to get her naturalized and everything else it was outrageous. And they were trying to do everything the right way. And I kept thinking, like, well, yeah, I mean, I try to find a way.
That too much, right? Yeah. That's my job.
Right.
Puts bread on the table. But.
Right. No, I get it. Just, it does seem like there's, the old adage of give me your tired, you pour your weak. We've kind of moved away from that.
Yeah, no. And that's a huge aspect of why I'm still doing immigration, because I feel drawn to that part of it, right? There's so many political things that get thrown around about illegals or whatnot, most of the,
but even that degrades the humanity of it.
Definitely. And I was about to say, we try to avoid terms like that, avoid alien even, right? Alien is just kind of a weird.
How do we describe aliens? Not exactly, not human, not of this world. And I get like there's another definition of it. And I'm not personally a fan of getting rid of words and things of that nature. But it's just, I don't like it. They're people.
Yeah. And that's what I found. The people that I work with every day, and I have, hundreds of cases that I'm over. Most of those people are the most hardworking, genuine, great people that I've ever known. And
trying to escape tyranny.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Which happened to us in the 18th century.
Yeah, it's exactly what we did. It's the foundation of America.
So I'm third generation. So my grandfather on my mother's side came over illegally, was naturalized. So it's one of those topics where, and to be fair, he was a man who, once you're naturalized, it's not like you're given much, and especially this is back in the day, so you really weren't given much. So it really had this. Again, it's not so simple to say pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's a very complicated issue. Poverty is, and rising out of that and going up the economic ladder.
Very much so.
But he was somebody who did that, and to see pictures of him and the way he lived, and then how my mother generationally didn't have the best situation either. She didn't have an aristocratic family that owned a farm in the South in the 1800s. You know what I mean? So I'm probably getting out of that. On my mom's side, I might be the most economically well off. But wow. So and again, that's great. That's great. I think to some degree that's how it should work. But it's also not that simple.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. People will do whatever they need to protect their family, to find opportunity. And I guess rather than pushing against them, the United States should find a way to not take advantage of or in that sense, but benefit from the people who want to do that.
Yeah.
And find a way to incorporate them and to make our country more diverse and beautiful. And at the same time, find ways to make our country in a position where we can take care of those people, financially, if, taxes and all that. And
yeah, I don't want to get too far into something national. So we can stop at any point if you want to move on to the city, because
Sure.
I love this discussion, and it's a fun discussion about meaningful things. But again, I don't want to distract from what we're here to do.
We can talk all day about immigration, but let's
not. Fair enough. Okay. So, getting into Ocean Springs. Okay. What did you like about Ocean Springs? What was it about the city that you really enjoyed?
Yeah. So the first person that I met from Ocean Springs was when I was at law school, Mary Wicks. I don't know if you remember her. She was Miss Mississippi. Marie. Sorry. Marie.
So we graduated high school together.
No way.
Yeah.
Cool.
Same class. Yep.
Great person. I mean, she was, we were on Law Journal together and worked closely together, and she's just amazing. I look up to her as a lawyer and in person.
That's amazing. So I know that when she was running, or like her sort of impactful, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Wasn't she interested in something that had to do with eye care at the time? I think it was. I think that was something in a platform when she was running for Miss America. And
possibly.
Whatnot, so.
I wasn't here for that. I met her after the fact. So But anyway, she mentioned Ocean Springs and kind of just talked about it in passing. Well, when we're toward the end of law school, we're all figuring out where we're going to go and get a job, and so it was either while I was clerking or before, but I talked to her about Ocean Springs, and because I had an interview down there, and she's like, she just exploded into, all the positives of Ocean Springs and the schools and everything that Ocean Springs is. And she wasn't wrong. Right. We came down to visit the firm and look around, and we ended up playing in the beach, on Front Beach and just kind of taking it all in and eating some food. And you just kind of fall in love with that iconic small town feel. But you're only 45 minutes from Mobile and an hour or so from New Orleans. So you're not cut off. Right. But you still get that feel of
you're right where you want to be.
And
it's
home.
And to be fair, like if you wanted to have a good safe night out at some nice bars, you could go downtown, See, back when me and Marie were in high school, past Pleasance, there wasn't much. And the office itself did not look the way it did. It was a very bland corner. Really? So and credit to Connie Moran for her vision of that, because she was a big part of that.
Oh, okay.
But there wasn't much down there.
Wow.
Honestly.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you drive down and it just kind of like welcomes you.
Yeah. I want to say that it was Chandelier Outfitters and Tato Nut were the main economic drivers of Government Street in that area.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So they pumped a lot of money into it, and a lot of money into the Mary C as well.
Like 15 years ago or so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they kind of started in 2006.
Yeah. No, that's 15 years.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. You're right. So yeah, it's exploded, and me working in air traffic control in the military, every Air Force air traffic controller gets trained at Keesler. And so they're all very familiar with Ocean Springs, and so they all say that like Ocean Springs is amazing. The downtown scene is wonderful. The city's beautiful, and people that live here, they really want to go to Ocean Springs,
Yep.
Ocean Springs has got a good thing going there.
Yeah. I remember hearing from somebody that also a huge, or part of the reason that exploded downtown was after Katrina lost access to Biloxi. Apparently people used to go to Biloxi to hang out and do things.
That's what I'm told. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a small downtown scene, but again, I mean, a lot of that was destroyed.
Right. Well, and the bridge was incapacitated. And so people in Ocean Springs had to either drive all the way around or stay here.
You were in Oxford, That's
it's a very similar.
That's a drinking
setup.
town with a football problem. Okay.
I got a big football problem in the last few years.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So I'm a Titans fan. So I'm a huge fan of AJ Brown, and probably my favorite player to watch right now is DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
And so those guys are
Excellent
studs.
player.
Yeah, for sure. But okay, so we talked about downtown, and that's a good place to start about some things here. What are your thoughts on improving the sort of access to downtown?
Yeah, the conversations that everyone's been having relating to parking and how to get around. And I've had some negative experiences trying to park and getting around, but I feel like the most part, it's manageable. The big issue is, I think, when we have our festivals and our big events, there's just a huge influx of people. And so creating an outlet for that type of parking, everyone's kind of the same opinion that we need something, and whether that's a parking garage or I'm not a huge fan of the one-way idea that I've heard passed around. I think that's probably too complicated.
Well, what are your thoughts on it? Like, why don't you like it?
Well, there's just not when you have one ways, you have the, going south and going north or east or west or whatever it is, you need the other direction. For sure. Right. And so we would have to have a road that's that can handle the traffic like government can to handle the other direction traffic, which I don't know. There's not really a road that sticks out in my mind that would be able to handle that.
Right.
Other than 90.
Yeah, exactly. And of course the fear is that if you go to 90, then you lose the traffic.
Yeah. Right.
There's a risk.
Creates too big of a hassle.
Yeah, exactly. To come back. And that is the issue. And unfortunately, I just don't know that there's a better solution. I mean, because they would have to go to Bowen then.
Right. Yeah. Bowen or Porter. But that's a couple streets away. So,
which I do think they're trying to get businesses to invest in Porter to draw some people to have a similar experience, like as government, especially as you get closer to Washington, but you don't have to go to government. You can go to Porter as well.
Yeah, that'd be nice to expand the downtown experience a little bit further out.
Yeah.
I could see that working. And I haven't seen somebody propose this in a way that would work yet, but I travel to El Paso fairly regularly we have an office out there.
Okay.
And El Paso has been huge growth, a city of growth in the last few years. They've had a lot of investment and a lot of development. And one of the things they did with their downtown, which I know it's a completely different scale of size and everything, but they created more walking space and pedestrian areas.
It's a very common thing in larger cities right now.
Yeah. And if we can make something like that work in downtown Ocean Springs, somehow increase the amount of business and accessibility and people to enjoy that area, I mean, I'd be all for that.
Yeah, I do think that that needs to be part of the discussion. The obvious problems here are, well, how do we provide ADA access when everyone has to walk? And I think that's a problem that can be mitigated either by incentivizing a free market structure to provide, some golf cart tax or clean energy tax.
We have golf carts.
Yeah, exactly. Or and it might be something. Look, if downtown is beneficial for the city, and the city makes their money off of sales tax, then it would behoove the city to whatever problem that they solve. They need to make sure that they're taking care of the access to the businesses. And if that means that there's somebody that is employed by the city to drive a golf cart, maybe some 16, 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, why isn't that part of the discussion? After all, I mean, the benefit is to the city, being able to get people to.
As a lawyer, I will say that's extra liability.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Notwithstanding the obvious risks there. But
yeah, it's a good idea. I know universities are also working toward that model. My alma mater, BYU, recently did that, created it, took out all the roads on the main campus, and Ole Miss has a lot of that too. They do have some access roads, but they're trying to make it more of a walking campus, right? Just kind of put everything there in walking distance, and people can walk from point A to point B without having to worry about a street, in a car coming.
Yeah, look, that's how Amsterdam is. That's how Germany is. I mean, having been to those countries, I mean, you're on your feet all day. And what's great about Germany is you have you have all these beer gardens, where people sit outside and they drink beer and whatnot, and you can order food, and they're everywhere. And you might ask, well, why are those so popular? Because you're on your feet and you need to rest. And so that's
Right.
that's the business that evolved from that. And so I also think that, I'm surprised that Ocean Springs is not, they don't shut down for like a Friday or Saturday evening to make a pedestrian only zone. It's not uncommon in southern towns to have like a First Friday kind of event where that's just something that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they did that when we lived in Jackson. They had started doing that in the Fondren area.
Yeah.
Seems like it might have been First Friday or something like that.
Yeah.
But, food trucks were all out and the vendors were all out and music. And it was great.
Look, and you can look towards that. First of all, if we had that, we could actually have a better understanding of how to make that work, because we would have tried it, and
Right.
every month would be an experiment to modify it a bit. But I'll say take a page from golf courses too, because if you have a disability, you get a flag on a golf cart and you can drive up to the green. You don't have to stay 30 yards from it. So maybe you register with the city and you need
Right.
that access. So you get a golf cart, you get a flag, it's registered that way, and you can actually drive through that area. I feel like these problems are mitigated.
Yeah, we can figure it out. There's a solution there.
Yeah. And oftentimes I think that the downtown issue is maybe not a solution possible so much, but rather we need to find the appropriate trade-offs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I don't envision or want to envision a downtown that's developed, to monstrosity of some sort. I think I love the way downtown is now, and if we can just tweak it or, some minimal changes so that it's more accessible and easier for people to get in and out, and that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. And they're working on Porter to make that happen as well. Trying to invest more in Porter. So I'm optimistic. Again, it's got to be solved. I mean, we've got to do something to move towards something that works a little better, because I'm concerned that we're going to get to a point where businesses are built and it's too inconvenient to come back there. And so we don't get the most out of the businesses as a city.
Right. Yep, exactly.
So, okay. Well, going down Washington Avenue, is obviously a really neat experience. You get this southern look there, and there's this natural urban canopy that exists, right?
Yeah, the trees.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you, some of those trees, I mean, they're old enough to have witnessed Iberville coming ashore,
That's right.
So have you had any experience dealing with the city when it comes to trees?
My first experience with the Ocean Springs tree issue, I'll say, was, and it's not an issue in a bad way. It's just, we have specific laws about
Brother, let it out.
So it was interesting. My first job in downtown Ocean Springs, Mr. Geis, Billy Geis, the main attorney, the head attorney there, you look out his window of his office and there's this tree branch that running across, the tree is basically growing with the building. And, there was, I don't remember if they had something like it was propping it up or helping it, but I asked him, I'm like, you need me to bring a chainsaw by and let's just, take care of this branch before it falls on the building. And he's like, no, you can't cut that tree. You can't touch these trees. And so that was kind of my first experience with, the zoning and city laws about it. And, but I think I kind of fall in the middle on this issue. I know there's contentious sides to this issue. And my perspective is we have to preserve trees for multiple reasons, if we can, right? Drainage and natural, creating the way they impact the ground and erosion and things like that.
And also wind protection from hurricanes.
Wind protection, right.
So,
and then on the flip side of that is sometimes a tree in a windstorm or a hurricane is a huge liability and a huge danger to a residence and things. So, there's two sides to the argument. I kind of just fall in the middle. I think the facts would determine where I stand on any particular, tree or decision to cut a tree. And I know the aldermen have to deal with that all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe they've not done it right every time, but I think for the most part they're trying and people are going to be upset one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, a case right now is, say, with Fort Marpaw, and that doesn't involve property rights per se, but so the city's insurance company said that if they don't take out the tree, like they're going to incur 100% of the liability if somebody gets hurt or whatever there. And that's a tough one too, because that's a very old tree, very large tree, and it provides benefit to the kids playing in that playground, that's a good example of why this issue is so tough, because aldermen have to work with an expert and get expert advice, because there's no arborist on there, and that's not their job anyway. But, an expert has to come in and say, this is what we should do. But the paradox here is that the arborist wants to avoid any sort of liability as well. So it seems like regardless, any way you put it, that tree's coming down.
Yeah. If we want to have a park, right? If we want to continue to have a city park there, we got to make sure that the liability and the risk is mitigated. And that's how you do it, by removing the thing that's causing the risk.
That's right.
You don't want to live. My uncle is in Dallas, Texas. Well, north of Dallas, Plano.
I know Plano.
Yeah, and highly developed area of Texas, right? A lot of brand new things, and they're planting trees. But my feeling every time I go there is like, where's the trees? You fly into Mississippi and into Gulfport, and it's just green,
everywhere.
I love that.
Yeah,
I missed that. Going other places and living other places, specifically Utah. Right, there's fewer trees there,
but Utah's got some beautiful landscape, though.
Their land, they've got Moab type, the Red Rock type stuff, and then they've got the mountains, the Uintas, which I loved. I think Utah's a place where I want to continue to visit, but it gets too cold for long-term living for me.
They got Monument National Park in Utah, right?
Yeah, Arches.
Yep.
I've never been to Monument, but Arches, and there's a few around there, Moab area.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So. Yeah. Ocean Springs the springs really, or the trees really, make Ocean Springs the way we want it to be. Yeah. It's the look we want. And so we got to balance that with people's ability to build houses and develop and the other issues.
Well, the trees are kind of a metaphor, right? They're kind of a metaphor for what has existed, transcended time, should continue to exist, define the character. Right. But I think the same thing can be true for thinking about Ocean Springs, and because of that, I think necessary progressive things that need to happen within the city are not necessarily occurring. Do you have any specific thoughts on that? Like any sort of maybe legacy thinking that's keeping the city from moving forward?
Well, that sounds like, something that I was recently introduced to with the city and how they, manage their budget and how they prepare for hurricanes and future climate events. And I think there's definitely some development or progression that could happen in that arena. This year, they're projecting an earlier hurricane season to start, right? It's going to start a little bit earlier because the Gulf is a lot warmer than it usually is. And regardless of whether that's, you want to call that climate change or wherever you stand on that issue.
Yeah, you really don't even have to have the discussion, although it's possible that it's related. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can just stand from the point of we're going to have an earlier hurricane season because the water's going to be warmer. Great. So let's rally around that point.
Yeah. And whether cyclical climate could be cyclical, there's different ways to look at it, but regardless, yeah, we have to worry about our infrastructure and how, if there are things that are going to come down the road that may impact us, what are we doing today to prepare for that?
Sure.
And, I don't think the city needs to go out and buy all electric cars or all of that, today, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe that'll happen in the future.
Sure.
But we can start by adopting policies today that will strengthen our infrastructure and our ability to weather bigger storms or stronger storms or encroaching waterfronts. I think any of that's a possibility. And so as our city budgets and tries to get their budget and their policies and goals on the, in writing, as the alderman, I would hope to bring that perspective and that out of the box thinking, thinking forward, thinking about the future and those possibilities, and bring that to the table to help craft those policies and craft those budget priorities for how the city approaches it.
Yeah, it's. I think one of the criticisms that I have about sort of right-leaning views as a right-leaning person is that you can be fiscally responsible and save all this money and everything else. What are you doing with it? How are you reinvesting it back into? I mean, I understand setting money aside, paying off debts, but look, we've really got to consider using the trappings of good fiscal policy in a productive way. You know what I mean? So, and I think to some degree it might be time to kind of look towards people that are maybe not on the right leaning aisle and just say, hey, look, great job here. We've done a good job raising money. Let's hear some ideas, okay? Because that might be more where you're focused on, and you might have a better perspective. Yeah,
I really appreciate that perspective and that view of it. There are so many issues at the city level that I think, regardless of politics, we all can agree on.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the common grounds that we need to find and figure out a way how to make, Ocean Springs better and prepare it for the future without sacrificing our conservative fiscal approach. Honestly, I mean, balancing the budget. We're a city, we're not the federal government who gets to print their own money.
Yeah.
But we have to worry about that and focus on how we use our funds and really how we benefit the citizens of the city and the services we provide and how we protect our citizens, from these weather events that may happen in the future.
Yeah. Well, and that will happen in the future.
That will happen, right.
I think everyone agrees. Not a question, of whether or not it will, but rather when. It's going to happen. It's the problem. It's the frustration and exhaustion of the dichotomy of the two-party duality is that, and again, you can reduce it to any number of things, but hey, you're really good at maybe raising money in fiscal policy. You're really good at spending money in a productive way. Left to their own devices, those are not desirable in any way. Right. So again, the best decisions are made at the margin of that dichotomy, and so it is something that we need to put a little more attention on, especially if the right leaning side has achieved what they're trying to achieve and raise capital.
Yeah, exactly.
So excellent. Well, cool. So. Talked about downtown Ocean Springs. We talked about, trees and tree management. What are your thoughts on, say, well, here, let's segue to City Hall here and talk about executive session.
Okay.
Now, executive session has become a pretty popular topic within this administration. A few events have come up that have really arguably been controversial. And what are your thoughts?
Well,
because you have a legal perspective.
Yeah, sure. As a lawyer, I mean, there's issues, human resource issues, liability issues, lawsuit issues that you just can't talk with the public, right? I think that horse has been beat dead.
Yeah.
But transparency is the other issue that I think comes up with this. And if there is a situation where we are not being transparent and we're abusing executive session, we need to stop that and we need to find a way to avoid that. I feel like that falls within the realm of the city attorney to guide that, right? Mm-hmm. To make sure that there's not some issue with the aldermen, abusing their responsibilities by not, being open to the public. And so hopefully that responsibility is being fulfilled. I think between those two issues, keeping what needs to be secret mm-hmm. for legal issues and human resource issues, and then being as transparent as possible. And,
right.
My perspective, I haven't really been involved in some of the issues that are related to the executive session that have come up, and I've heard about them, and I definitely, I'm starting to form an opinion of it, but I think it really comes down to transparency, right? Can it be more transparent? If the answer is yes, then it should. Right.
Do you think now? This is probably not the question asked because you just said like you're starting to form an opinion on it. But do you have any, with your understanding of it thus far, do you have any ideas on ways to make it more transparent?
Well, I like that we are able to stream our meetings, and obviously, if it's a closed door meeting, it's probably not going to be something we stream. But if there's a way to make it more transparent by providing meeting notes or minutes of the meeting.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Then again, I think that comes down to procedural rules that the aldermen adopt, and how to handle their meetings. And I'm not 100% familiar with those, but it also could come down to rules that are adopted in our code or statutory rules with the state of Mississippi. Again, not an expert on that, but as an alderman, if I were elected, I would look at ways to reduce, situations where we're not transparent, right? That's the job of the alderman to be transparent, to be available for discussion of these, anything they can discuss with the citizens, right? The people of the Ocean Springs, so that they're aware, and if they want to be aware, they can get the information they want.
Well, there's another player in there in the room, and I'm not talking about the mayor, but the city attorney is part of this too, and they're employed to protect the interests of the city, and so
right.
it is interesting that you have to assume, I would say, that if everything's on the up and up and everyone's trying to do a good job, that they're using executive session for the proper reasons. Because otherwise, ideally, the attorney would say, well, no, this is not a... But,
you would hope so.
But that's the thing, is you would hope so. And that, again, therein lies the problem, is that you don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
And secrecy in the American democratic process is not, doesn't fly. Does not fly
right.
at all. Yeah. And especially at the local level, there's no circling back. At the local level, like they want answers.
Yeah, and that's something I would be interested to figure out what the basis. Where's that base? Is that a procedural rule that the body's adopted, or is that within the codes of how to operate? I'd be interested to see what the basis of a closed door session is, and then if that's a very gray, broad basis, that may explain why it could be potentially abused, right? Because it just depends on. If they're following the rule, it doesn't necessarily mean the rule's right.
I'd like to be a fly on the wall, you asking the city attorney about that, just to hear the sort of questions you would ask. And not from a perspective of inquiring to the degree to prove that your thinking's wrong, but just to try and understand. I'd be interested to hear.
At this point, that's has come up enough where I am interested in that. And there's a few different issues that I've been wanting to talk to the city attorney just to get a perspective from my own edification, right? And my experience, talking to another lawyer, you can kind of relate to some degree, hopefully, and then understand, that job and that role and how they view it. I wasn't able to. I tried to on Tuesday, but they were at a closed door session actually. So, and they didn't come out. And so I was like, well, I can't wait around all night. So I went home. Sure.
They might have known you're out there.
Probably.
Wonderful. So, with the, I'm sorry, excuse me. Let's talk about East Ocean Springs.
Okay.
East Ocean Springs. So it's an area that's ripe for development, but it seems that things that go out there, like the Tractor Supply has been the most, has been the best development out there that we've seen, and it's not much. There's a restaurant just to the west of it that consistently fails to, stay open, and but there's a fear of developing East Ocean Springs, right? Because they're worried about losing the identity. Again, maybe this is part of that old thinking mentality, but should we be pursuing development in East Ocean Springs?
Well, I think with development, right, like if we sit here and pontificate about, whether it's right or wrong or good or bad, we can do that all day. But I think at the end of the day, we just have to, if somebody wants to build out there, then and they have the money and the capital and the place and they own the land or whatever it is and all that's set up, then we have to decide if we want to do it. I feel like if that all lined up, there wouldn't be a doubt. I feel like at least the current administration seems to be behind that type of development. So I don't know if it's an issue of us wanting to develop out there and just not, or if nobody else wants to develop out there, and nobody's taken the position to do it, right? I don't know if it's an issue of ability or desire, if that makes sense.
Right. And I've heard different things. I've heard things such as, for example, I think it's World Market. They want to deliver their own alcohol. And so you can't do that in Mississippi because it has to go through ABC.
Yeah.
And so people like Hank Zuber and others are trying to change that. But I think honestly, the passing of the marijuana bill is going to help, but ABC accounts for $300 million a year of revenue. So, I mean, we've got to answer that question too. But in any case, I think that's one of the major reasons why it's been hard, because what Ocean Springs also seems to be trying to do is attract the right business. They're looking for an affluent, large anchor store is what they're doing. And it seems like they got Aldi, and so that's a benefit.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So again, I mean, if we're actively seeking it out, and we can talk about, we didn't really bring it up, but the company that the city hired to try to do that, the firm they hired to do that, so I don't know if at the end of the day, if it's just we want it and nobody else does, or we're just big picky and we're not having the right, have the right person show up for it.
It's tough to say because we put $1. We keep allowing Dollar General, so I don't know how picky the city's actually being. And on that point, there's a Dollar General in East Ocean Springs. So,
I've been there many times.
yeah, exactly. So
yeah, I think when I look at that part of Ocean Springs, I mean, I see a ton of potential around the sports complex and 57. Mm-hmm. I think, and I know there's environmental concerns with the wetlands and things in that area. And I don't know if that's causing a huge restriction to growth there, but I would like to see some kind of development and growth in that area. There's a lot of houses, in that area, right behind Tractor Supply and mm-hmm. those, developed. And I think, that sort of level of housing is great for Ocean Springs. And I would like to see even more of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. My wife's parents live in Lakeview right there.
Yeah, Lakeview.
And then I think Mike Impey's talking about how there's a project underway to connect that neighborhood with the service, with a road that goes to another neighborhood behind that. So that's going to be good for Ward 6. Yeah.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
They're
going to put a park out there too. And so.
Okay. Yeah, that's an issue, back to Ward 1, connection between the different neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. For me, being in small Culleoka, we have 3 kids and, we're always trying to look for new ways to ride bikes and go on walks and things.
Yeah.
And so we would love to be able to connect ourselves to the bigger Culleoka and, mm-hmm. So sidewalks and access to the neighborhoods, between each other. That's an issue for me that I'd like to see some kind of, solution at some point.
It would be nice. I don't know what the west side of, say, the north part of Gold Park Estates and the west side of, I don't know how you could get there from Monticello because the houses go all the way around. But I wonder if there's a way to access Culleoka in a more direct way to Fort Byu, because that would open up a lot of place for you to bike.
Oh, yeah. And they have the nice streets. So,
mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Sound a little jealous about Fort Byu. I'm just saying.
I've been spending a little bit more time there lately. And so.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Do you have concerns about development in East Ocean Springs? Because there's some people who want to drop Sangani in East Ocean Springs, all the big box stores.
Yeah. I don't envision that being a good thing for Ocean Springs. Yeah. And simply because honestly, D'Iberville is not that far away. Right. So I guess we could draw off Gaucher and Pascagoula potentially, but no, I'm thinking things that are more attractive for visitors. Right. Mm-hmm. I know you've talked about, people who are coming for those sports events and the baseball, traveling teams and things coming and having something there for them to sleep and eat, right? Somewhere for them to sleep and something for them to eat.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not self-evident driving out of that baseball park, which way they should go, to
You're kind of
find,
in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's something to that. We definitely have to address that in some way, because there could be 300-400 kids on a weekend down there, and that's disposable money that could be coming back to the city.
Yeah,
you know?
for those of us who live in the middle of Ocean Springs, I kind of consider myself in the middle, though I guess there's more development and more things, on one side. So it's kind of, but that's the thing. I mean, if there were options for us, it's not a distance thing at that point. You can get to downtown just as fast as you can get to 57.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sure most Ocean Spring people are of the same mind. They would, go this way or that way. There'd be less people in East Ocean Springs. So I feel like there's definitely a market there for restaurants or entertainment or whatever they want to, try to build out there.
Yeah. I think once the Aldi is built, that'll be a good anchor store. Yeah. Talking to Elizabeth Vader-Hosey, she had a great idea of, we should look to develop places like East Ocean Springs, but she was actually talking specifically about, where the Dollar Tree is and the Goodwill.
Yeah. Right.
So that used to be a jitney jungle. And so you had this need for this large parking lot. You do not need it now.
Yeah. The Ace Hardware is right there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the main thing I get to probably.
Yeah, me too. And so she was talking about kind of these garden squares placed in there, and perhaps that would attract smaller, maybe boutiques or more green type of shops, restaurants, but turn that concrete, area into something more of a park area where the parking available meets the parking need as well.
Exactly. It's a lot of wasted space.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, yeah, I've never, I drive by that every day. I've never seen, more than 10 or 15 cars in that whole area. And that's a huge lot.
Have you ever traveled abroad?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I spent 2 years in South Africa.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. I forgot about that. So, spending time in Germany, and I've mentioned Germany, you walk around everywhere. I'd love to see something in East Ocean Springs that would be more so like that, where you had maybe vacation rentals on top of businesses, and it was, cobblestone walkways where people could bike down through there, maybe have golf carts so people in East Ocean Springs can play around with golf carts.
Yeah, that'd be a very attractive proposition.
Yeah. And then, so essentially creating that, because now you can have, a more, say, I don't know, modern downtown feel that still captures the same essence of what the older downtown is, but it certainly would give some variety and diversity.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that idea. I think there is a lot of potential near that area that you mentioned and others for that type of development. I don't think we would have big box stores, D'Iberville type style development, but something that's
You'll probably need one.
Well,
just to bring it,
but not 10 and 12,
exactly,
right? But I think that would fit the character of our city, and still fulfill all the things that we want to fulfill. The people being attracted and staying and coming. I think several people have mentioned there's just not a hotel option.
Yeah.
And I was just booking a hotel for my dad actually, and I was like, I really want him to stay in Ocean Springs. And as much as I want him to stay at the Roost or the, what's the new one?
It's the, they're
Bitnik.
I don't know.
Anyway.
Are you talking about the ones on Porter?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you're talking
Beatnik.
about. That sounds right.
Yeah. Anyway, those are great options. They're beautiful, but they're a little out of my price range. So, and so but your options are fairly limited. It's either really expensive or too cheap. So yeah, I think there's opportunity for Ocean Springs to develop in that way too. I mean, provide options for people.
Well, and I think too, you could, so here's the other side of the coin, right? If you develop the downtown area today, knowing what you know about downtown and West Ocean Springs, you could probably develop it in a very productive way that takes advantage of large walking spaces, that allows access for vehicles, parking, all this stuff, which to some degree might make it more attractive, both for businesses and people going down there, because you're not going to run into these issues. So then the fear is like, well, are you going to start taking away from West Ocean Springs and the traffic and economic activity, back that way?
Well, from a city's perspective, as long as the outcome is income? Right. As long as the tax revenue is not impacted, I don't think it's against the interests of the city.
Fair point.
I think where on the other side of it is, are you benefiting more of your citizens? And because at the end of the day, if there was something like downtown closer to me, on closer to East Ocean Springs and all the people who live over there, we might go out more or eat out more or go do things out of the house more because it's a little bit closer, more accessible and easier to park. Yeah. If they develop it right.
Which again, I'm sure they will, because the first, like it's almost like, I'm certainly overstating this, but it's like, it's PTSD about like, I just want a place where I can go to and park. I can plan. I don't have to spend 30 minutes trying to navigate, wait for someone to back out so I can park. Let's get that right at the onset. Right. Plan for growth as well.
Yeah, we would be, and not to say that they weren't smart about it when they made Ocean Springs, but Ocean Springs is
a small town.
It was always a tiny town. So that was something that's
the Mary C was I think at one point outside of the city limits.
Oh, wow.
I think that's true. I could be wrong, but I think that's true. It was either the edge or outside the city limits.
Yeah.
So
I can see that. Yeah. So, I mean, it was unintended to these problems, but we have the opportunity to do something, I think, in East Ocean Springs that would provide a great opportunity for all those citizens that live on that part of the city. Yeah.
We talked about annexing earlier, but I'm curious, should we be annexing the land that contains the high school?
It is kind of weird not to have the high school in your city limits. I think the discussion really revolves around, the ability to provide services that a city provides if we annex all those neighborhoods, especially Gulf Park Estates and all of the neighborhoods just south of the high school there. Do we have the ability to afford it? Can the city afford to do that? I think that's the main discussion. I think if in a perfect world, all things being equal, well, yeah, obviously we'd annex everything we could.
Sure.
But I think the biggest concern comes up is whether it's, affordable and feasible under the current, budget.
Yeah. And it's much more expensive to do that now that we've raised the salary of our police officers. So it's far more costly and it might make, on the subject of Gulf Park Estates, first of all, some people just want to live outside the city limits because they don't want to have issues cutting down trees. Right. It could be just that simple.
Could be.
There's lots of people that I know that live in Gulf Park Estates that have bees. They want to be able to have bees, and they're worried that they'd be regulated that way, or they have bat houses because they want to combat the flying insect population. Did you know that a bat?
I did not know about
1,000 insects an hour, 1,000 flying insects an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to have bat houses, to be honest with you, because
now I do.
Yeah, exactly. The bugs are terrible, and they don't. It does matter. Podcast is not about bats, but look it up. It's really interesting. It'll make you want bats. But yeah, and so you're talking about thousands of homes out there, and now immediately, within, I don't know the exact time, Doug Walker told me 5 years, but in 5 years, you've got to be able to provide all those services, switch them over to city water and everything and sewer. And man, that's a lot of homes out there,
that have ongoing and historical issues already.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of taking, it's like, you buy it as it is. And so I think if there were a way to prepare, and to get fiscally ready to take on that burden, that I would be in favor of it, right? I mean, I think making Ocean Springs include everything that people who are looking from afar think is Ocean Springs, even though it's not.
They pretty much say that Ocean Springs is everywhere that the school district allows to go to Ocean Springs schools. I feel like that's the way they think of Ocean Springs.
Right, which is more than it actually is.
Exactly. Like, for example, Gulf Park Estates, so.
Yeah. And I mean, while we're talking about schools, and this is something I imagine is not something that we can make an issue or worry about too much, but if we did include more of Ocean Springs Road, I'm on the very edge of the city, actually. Greg Gibson's actually, his city is his house is on the edge right there, but, right across from us is, houses for the county. And I always thought it was weird that the schools, the elementary schools in particular, where they are, right? In the future, if we are annexing or adding more parts of Ocean Springs Road communities, it would make sense if we had an elementary school on the north side of 90, and potentially draw those lines so they make a little bit more sense.
I think that would have to happen. Do you know why they are there?
I am sure there is a in-depth history about why those lines are so weird.
Very simple reason. Why the laws are is different from why the schools are. But so you'll notice all the schools are along government.
Right.
Yeah. So everything's right there. So it's in the Mississippi Constitution that public education must be provided. Okay. So it's an obligation by the state, lowered down to the districts, the municipalities and whatnot. But so every, I think, 6th acre or 7th acre has a plot of land reserved for school development. And it just so happens that ours, where they are all along that road.
Huh.
So Ocean Springs High School was built on one of those plots for that. So was the middle school, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, and you can look on a map and kind of see the distance between them and see how that's planned out. Like the distance between the middle school and say the high school is an approximate distance from say Tacony, because Tacony and the Mary C are kind of on the same property, right? School, look at the distance of Oak Park.
Yeah.
Pecan Park.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a piece of history I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, and then, but the difference is Pecan and Magnolia. But I think it's like a double or triple distance with there. But
okay.
Yeah. Odd, huh?
And from I guess with an outsider's perspective, when we first moved here, felt like. So I guess one thing I failed to mention, my wife and I, we did fostering.
Okay.
We were foster parents, and so we had a foster child who was going to a different school. Anyway, we were like passing 2 schools to get to that school. And it was just kind of like, well, it was just a weird setup.
Yeah. I lived in Heron Bayou growing up, and Magnolia Bayou or Magnolia Elementary was right down the road, and I went to Pecan. So, really weird. I had to do a transfer actually. So I think that's how it went. I would go to Magnolia and have to transfer buses to get onto Pecan.
Interesting.
So I was doing that at, you did that in school, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. So
right.
Yeah. Pretty wild stuff. So you foster, that's awesome.
Yeah, we did it. We started in Jackson and did it for a few years. We had our last child who's 2 now, and we had
It's young to foster.
Well, yeah. So we were fostering when he was born, and that's when we had to take a break from it because it was just a little too much having our 2. We have 3 kids total, and 8-year-old, 5-year-old, and now a 2-year-old, and so at the time. So anyway, but the years we did it, we really enjoyed it. We had lots of different children, and that's something that really gives you an inside view into the other side of living in Mississippi, right? The issues that people face, drugs and poverty and things like that.
Yeah.
And, but all you can do is try to make that one child's life a little bit better. So,
yeah, I was in foster care when I was younger. So,
wow.
Yeah, I was. So again, the issues with being, with generational issues or not having the generational wealth, you fall into these category of statistical probabilities, right? So my mother, I was born out of wedlock. And so my mother was a single Hispanic mother, had her own vices. She was abusive. So for the first 4 years of my life, I lived with my mom, and I was an abused kid. And so from 4 to about 5, I lived in foster care while my dad, who was in the military at the time, didn't know I was born.
Oh,
and
wow.
so he had to fight the state of Texas in order to.
And it is a fight.
Yeah, it's a hell of a fight, and for good reason. For good reason, you don't want it to go into the wrong family, especially there's unfortunately stories of kids that get adopted into worse homes. So there's all sorts of issues. Yeah. But I'm glad things worked out for you. Yeah. So far, so good.
It appears to be. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, man, I think the last thing that we haven't talked about is maybe preserving art and culture in Ocean Springs. I mean, it's that's a big part of this culture, which I'm sure you're aware of. I mean, I met my wife in piano class in high school. So the band production here is a major production at halftime. I like to tell people there's no good time to get up and go to the restroom at an Ocean Springs Greyhound football game, because you go at halftime, you're going to miss that show. And it's a great show.
Yeah. My wife's a marching band nerd.
Okay.
And so that was a big thing. I met her when we were out in Utah at school, and she was in the marching band for the BYU Cougars. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
But yeah.
Is she impressed by the band here?
She has a few, I think she's had a few students who are in the flute program or who play flute.
Okay.
High school. And I don't know that we've been to see them play other than at Mardi Gras parades.
Sure.
And so we're always yelling at the flutes, go flutes.
They've got, I think, a collegiate worthy halftime program for sure.
They, at least the students that she's had are some pretty impressive, flutists.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But so as far as arts go, I mean, I grew up doing theater, and I did a little bit of music. I'm not musically inclined like my wife is, and then she's a musician, and she teaches piano and flute lessons.
Okay.
If anybody's looking, I think she's actually full, but so our family, I mean, art is very important. Our children are always involved in those types of activities. And as far as the city goes, I think for me, it boils down to, again, the city is there to provide services and to ensure that people of the city are receiving things that they want or need. And I think everybody in Ocean Springs agrees that we want to foster a great relationship with arts and many different capacities, right? Different types of arts. And so my perspective is that it's, important. And I will say I'm not super knowledgeable about everything that went down with the Mary C. I've been in the building a lot, and I've seen, over the years that we've lived here, but if it's not the Mary C., I would like to see the city take action and efforts to foster some kind of relationship with the arts community in some way, and to make sure those services are provided for the people of Ocean Springs.
I agree. And my opinion is that I know that a lot of it, like, you've got to address the money issue. I get it. Part of me thinks that the Mary C. might be a token of something that's where its value transcends the money that it produces.
Yeah.
And maybe it might be the case that we can handle a little bit of loss of revenue as long as it's producing the essence of what we want it to produce. Do you have any ideas on maybe like what else it could be used for?
Well,
because there's been discussions of it being like kind of a destination for art, where it kind of combined, like, say, maybe an artist residency program with kind of vacation rentals where people can come in and they can stay and experience art throughout a weekend.
Yeah, that sounds interesting to me.
Yeah.
I guess we want to separate, the free, city services and amenities, I guess you could call them, as opposed to like a business, I guess if what you're describing is, the city putting on these things and making these available to people, then that sounds, something like that the city could do. But it sounds like it could be either way.
Yeah. That's going to be my fault. Let me turn that off real quick.
Okay. I was worried it was mine.
No, you're good. I made the mistake.
I've got two phones, a work phone and a personal, and you never know.
I watched you. I watched you turn them off, and it didn't even click. Like, man, make sure you do that too.
You just never know. You think you flicked it, and you just don't know.
Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So, yeah, I think definitely what's necessary is the city needs to be more involved, or make it clear. What I tell people in the organizations that I've been a part of, and even philanthropic organizations that I've headed myself, look, this is what we absolutely do want. This is what we absolutely do not want, and I want you to surprise me with everything in the middle of those bounds. You know, basically
set the priorities, set the goals,
make it clear.
See, decide what you want as a city.
Yeah,
and then let the
support
people
each other.
Let the people who are experts provide, and like you said, surprise you with what they can come up with. But I mean, it seems like, as I'm looking from outside of all this drama that's going on, it seems like there was mixed priorities, mixed motives, or there was differing motives. And those things don't line up. That explains why the city, took it away. So I don't know. I think that's what needs to happen. There needs to be, they need to figure out what they want and then work toward that goal and partner with the people who are going to make it happen.
Yeah, there's certainly some of that. I would say, this is me speaking. This is Brian speaking.
Brian,
I think that's being a little too gracious in my opinion. Personally, it felt like your family was airing out your dirty laundry online, and it felt like not your family obviously, but like that's
right,
it felt like my family was doing that, and what was frustrating to me is like some of the issues I thought like, man, y'all really couldn't find some sort of resolution together. You couldn't, like, you were so at odds with each other that there was no common ground to find by which to build some sort of relationship, because it seems a lot like interpersonal, relationship issues. And my God, if you're going to let an organization like that fall because y'all had organization or interpersonal problems, I mean, that's embarrassing.
Yeah. Again, I'm looking from the outside.
Again, this is me speaking.
Yeah,
this is me speaking.
You may have a better, but yeah, that would be unfortunate and not appropriate for the great city that we're in and the services that we could offer.
Yeah.
If we're limiting that ability to do so because of a squabble, then that's definitely not appropriate.
Now, you mentioned that you weren't, you may have not said this. I'm okay. Did you say that like you're not very artistic? Is that
I think my wife would agree with that statement.
Okay, fair enough. So my wife would say, right, same here. I try, and I have fun doing it. But my wife tells me that there's a gentleman in Ocean Springs who takes people in and does pottery lessons, right? And by the end of it, you make an entire dinner set.
Wow.
Now that's pretty rad. Because you're learning this pottery stuff and you're learning how to make different types of pottery, but at the end of it, you have something tangible that can be of use in your home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think of programs like that and maybe reaching out to that individual, maybe just doing like it 4 times a year, and then you create something exclusive, and then he can probably upcharge for that. It might be pretty profitable, but again, the city would reap a benefit from that sort of residency program.
Yeah, and I think when I think of art programs and things like that, I did say I did theater in high school.
Okay,
and I really enjoyed doing that, and I feel like along with sports, well, not along with, but like similar to sports, art is a way to engage the youth. Music and art and sports, those are all things that we want our kids to do and get involved in, so they're not doing other stupid stuff that they might do otherwise if they didn't have something to keep themselves busy with. Yeah. And so I feel like that's maybe the interest of the city, or should be, right? Like to provide those, or to make sure that they're available for the youth of our community, to have options. Maybe not everyone's not into sports. I think we have a lot of sports here in Ocean Springs, through the city and otherwise. Mm-hmm. But so I feel like arts fills that can fill that need for our kids to find outlets that are healthy and productive.
Well, I definitely agree with you. I mean, that's why the Olympic Games were so important to the Greeks. That's why gymnasiums or lyceums were places where thought was had too. Because you were developing your mind as a muscle as well. And so, I couldn't agree more. I would love to see something in the Merici go from an art and culture center to an art, culture, and humanities center. Where people can learn those lessons, because sports are teaching us those lessons in humanity as we act them out. Yeah. You're learning about cooperation, you're learning about merit, you're learning about ethics. I mean, I had a conversation, there's a guy in, I won't say where he lives. He lives in Ocean Springs. His name is Michael Beach. This man is a steel trap for sports information. I mean, and he's got a lot of sports memorabilia in his bar. He's a great dude. But we talk about sports, and the worst person that you could ever be in America is somebody that cheats at sports. I don't think there's a worse place to be. If you're found to be cheating in sports or not giving your effort, you are vilified.
Sure.
And so I do think sports play an excellent role, but after all, they're just acting out the same things that you can learn in the humanities that we're not, I don't think as a society are putting the same amount of effort into as we have in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the city should have an interest in providing some services like that to people in the city, whether or not they're youth, but I mean, I think especially with the youth, providing opportunities like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've talked about a lot.
Yeah. I think we've covered from A to Z.
Pretty much. So is there anything else you'd like to broach or talk about? Or
well, one thing that I guess there's a handful of things that I try to let people know that are important to me, and one of those things would be there's something called the Human Rights Campaign Index Score for Municipalities.
Okay.
Essentially, this is, how well is your city doing with its laws and its employees and hiring standards and just a number of things. It's 2-page list. And currently Ocean Springs has a score of 4 out of 100, which isn't great. And it's something that I feel like can be easily rectified. In fact, it may even be something that we're already working on or have in place, but maybe it's not apparent. But I feel like that's something, we're a diverse population here on the coast. We have so many people from so many different backgrounds. And I want to make sure that Ocean Springs is a safe place for all of those citizens, a place where they can feel comfortable to live and work and spend their time and their money here and grow their kids. And so I feel like that's a way that I'd be interested in, if elected, and even if not, if someone else from Ward 1's elected, I may come after you. But to figure out how we can incorporate some of those principles and ideas to score better, but just the score is not important. It's really what's behind the score that's important.
Right.
What's in place right now to make sure that we have, proper laws and things.
Yeah. The score's an indicator, and chasing the metric doesn't mean you're going to have long-term success in those realms. You have to have the principle, behind it, the need and desire for that change. I'm curious, how is that data compiled? Do you know?
The way it says,
hiring standards that are reported.
Yeah, it's basically looking at what's available to the public. So again, this is just an issue that's important to me, but I don't have all the information on it. All I can see is I can look up the score online like anybody. So it's something that all it says is the researchers gather that data from the city. Okay. And so I don't know if it's stuff, if they talk to people or if they just look at what's available online or what it is. But I know Biloxi just announced, or there was a Facebook post about how they had raised their score dramatically, right? And I'm imagining they did that with just a few simple changes or things that they made apparent to, and I think it's important that we make those hiring standards or anti-discrimination laws apparent to the people of the city, because it may be very well impacting somebody in the city if we don't have it apparent or available and known to them.
It wouldn't surprise me though if as we've kind of talked offline about how maybe Ocean Springs could do more in the technology realm to bring things up to speed. To your point, it could be the case that we are working towards these things, but maybe the infrastructure to get that information to these researchers doesn't exist.
Yeah, maybe that's it. So I know it's even changed drastically since I've lived here. I feel like it's going in the right direction on a technology front, and accessibility and the website and the information and the Facebook posts and the Twitter and all that. It's definitely gotten better. And I think that's great because people of my generation, we kind of thrive off of that type of data information and accessibility. So,
yeah, I do think, to me, this is an easy rock here. So, if your score is 4 out of 100, I would imagine, to your point, like you're not having to do too surgical of a policy movement in order to bring that up. You're probably talking about broad strokes, or probably bring that up significantly.
I'm sure that's something that most people would agree with and be on board for. Maybe it's just not been brought up. I think that's as kind of winding down here, I'll just say, my reason for running is because I feel like I will bring kind of an alternate voice or a out of the box approach to policy, to leadership and governance, with the city. And not to say that someone else couldn't do that, but I felt called to do that, to bring my voice to the table. And even if I'm not elected, I hope to do that in some way. Right. And so that's kind of my goal going forward. Right. This is my way to get myself thrown into this scene and to meet people and to get myself involved in a way that hopefully I can, help the city develop and move in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. Well, look, I think you've got a great perspective. Having a background in law is certainly going to be an aid. I think it'll also help give a fresh perspective and confirmation to things like executive session.
Right.
But I also think your viewpoint, while it may be progressive, and for some reason that word has been, tainted a bit, and I hate that that's the case, but you're geared towards progress, and progress is also confronting the challenges of the city that are organic, but also maybe contained in natural disasters like hurricanes, which is obviously something that we have to make sure that we are prepared for. But look, I'm very happy. I'm very happy that you're running, and I'm especially happy after talking to you because this was kind of our first time, ever meeting. So I'm very impressed, and I do think that it's going to be a tough decision for the residents of Ward 1, but that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, for sure.
It really is. So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I have a Facebook. Okay. Elect Riches for Ward 1 is kind of the page. You can find it, I'm sure, if you search it. I also have a Twitter. Okay. Elect Riches for O. I think for some reason it didn't spell one. I don't know why the handle came out weird, but it's Elect Riches.
You can change
number
that.
4. Oh yeah, I need to see.
Well, we'll get it right in the post, and then we'll
make sure it matches. But
we'll put it on the website.
People can find me on Facebook, Brandon Riches. There's not too many Riches. It's fairly different names, so you should be able to find me.
Yeah, and, I found you pretty easily.
Yeah, so I'm on there and accessible, and we'll respond pretty quickly.
All right. Well, again, thanks for stopping by. Wish you the best of luck in your campaign, Brandon.
Thank you, sir.
All right, everybody. We'll see you.